Just getting started. Solid cloudy day. It's really bright and like blue skies in Waterloo today.
It's sunny. It's sunny here.
Sunny, yeah. I was outside, not thinking it was going to be hot, wearing a sweater. And I was really warm in the sun. So. No, oh, I mean eclipse night. Oh, yes. Hello. We'll just get a few more people to come in and then we can get started. We are now live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube friends. Sunny now. I know, of course, it's sunny during the day when we want it to be sunny, but not at night. Like sunny and clear. That's what I mean. Okay. So welcome back to Insider's Guide. You already know us. And we're getting to the end of our spring season. It's getting warmer, it's getting into summer. So slowly we're gonna talk about everyone's favorite observing season when it's nice and warm to be outside and how to plan for that. So this episode is about planning your observing session. We're also gonna review the last of the spring Messiers. In terms of updates from national side of things, we have launched our GA General Assembly website, and tickets are now on sale. If you don't know, I'm sure many of everybody has probably attended at least one or heard of them. Our General Assembly is basically RASC's national conference. This year it's going to be virtual. It's about 3.5 days we have 3 keynote speakers, one for every evening that we're doing it. We have 3 different tracks of sessions for youth to beginner observers we have citizen science. We also have tours of astronomy places such as, I'll give you some hints. Snow Lab was one of them that we're working on getting a tour, and Science North. So we got some cool stuff coming your way. Tickets are $15 for anyone under 21, $20 for RASC members, and $25 for non-RASC members. So get your tickets today. I'll share the link in the chat. It's rasga2022.ca. Really easy. Other than that, an update on the Insider's Guide. We have now our schedule up for all the way until September. We, as normally, and Chris can discuss more on what he has planned if you'd like, but in the summer, everybody gets busy, goes on vacation, and we like to give, Chris does a lot of the work, so he wants a little bit of a vacation.
I get a bit of a break, yeah.
He gets a little bit of a break, and I do too, I guess, but as I said, Chris is the carries the load in this show. So we're going back to once a month episodes, but fine, we have lots of jam-packed stuff. We'll still cover all the Messier objects, and you can check out what the next, I think, 4 or 5 sessions are on ras.ca/insiders guide. And with that, I don't think I have any other things to talk about. We can just dive right in.
Well, we have breaking news. Okay, I just want to let everybody know of a chance. So on Monday night, May 30th, after midnight, so about 1 a.m. on May 31st, there's a possibility of a meteor storm, like literally hundreds, 1,000 meteors per hour. I mean, it's not sure. So it could be nothing or it could be fantastic. And what's going on is that there's a gentleman by the name of Joe Rao. He's a meteorologist in New York City. He works at the Hayden Planetarium. And he's done a study about the debris train of a comet named 73P Schwarzmann-Walkman, discovered in 1930 or so. It's a periodic comet with a 5.4-year orbit that shuttles roughly to the orbit of Jupiter and then just a little bit closer to the sun than Earth's orbit. So kind of between those 2 ranges. And it's kind of a unimpressive comet. It was sort of magnitude 12 when it would show up every 5 or so years. But in 1995, reports started pouring in of this naked eye comet that everybody could see. And it turned out that it had basically exploded, fragmented into big chunks. And so it had brightened up. And so they took pictures with Hubble and Spitzer and other telescopes since then. And up to now, or the last time around they took some looks at it, it had broken up into about close to 70 chunks, 70 pieces. And so astronomers think that perhaps in breaking apart that it has actually emitted a big swarm of additional extra particles than you normally get from a comet. And it is an Earth orbit crossing trajectory. So at about 1 a.m., which is basically, so it's 05 universal time, okay, on May 31st, which translates to 1 a.m. in the Eastern time zone. What's that? Midnight in the Central, 11 in the Mountain, and then 10 in the Pacific time, and then 2 a.m. Atlantic. We could pass through, potentially, we could pass through a brief but intense period of meteor storms for about an hour or so. Now you could start looking, you know, an hour or two ahead of that if you want to, but that's kind of the prediction. Now, the reason it's so uncertain is we've never encountered this swarm of particles before, and whether or not it'll be exciting is depends on whether the particles ejected during the breakup were of sufficiently high velocity to overcome the sun's solar radiation to disperse them out of the comet's orbit. If they were energetic enough to hold together into the orbit, then it'll be there for us to pass through. Otherwise, it might be nothing. So if it's clear where you are, it's a beautiful, you know, late May evening, late May night, you know, bundle up with a chaise, take your telescope, take your binoculars, not for the meteors, but just in case there are no meteors, you won't have wasted your time out. But I just want everybody to have a heads up. This is possible. I'm going to share a picture. I'll share my screen here and I'll show you the.
So as people are
Radiant.
clarifying in the chat, it's the night between May 30th to May 31st. So 1 a.m. Eastern time, that's 10 p.m. Pacific.
So it's 1 a.m. on Tuesday in the Eastern time zone, but it's Monday evening in Western Canada. Yeah.
So yeah, 1 a.m. on that evening between May 30th, night between May 30th and May 31st. I know in my head I get confused when it flips over at midnight. So
well, you may hear about it in the media and they may be talking about May 31st, but you don't want to wait until the night of May 31st. It's the night of May 30th that you want to get out there. Yeah. So this funny looking chart here of North America, South America, the bullseye rings show the height of the radiant of the meteors, which is in the constellation of Boötes, kind of just a little bit above Arcturus. It'll be nearly overhead for folks in southwestern US. For us in the Great Lakes and across the lower part of Canada, it'll be kind of high in the western sky, basically. Not quite overhead, but high in the western sky. And this is the sun angle, these lines here. So fully dark southeast of this line, and the sunset southeast of this line. So if you're out sort of in Vancouver area, the sun will already have set, but the sky won't be dark at the predicted peak. But you want to hang in there and wait for the sky to get darker, and maybe you'll get lucky with some of these meteors. So that's the story. Just fingers crossed for everybody for clear skies.
I'm going to share an article from space.com in the chat that talks about this.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
There we go. So, thank you for that. I had no clue. This is why we keep Chris around. Oh, that and many other reasons.
All right. So we're going to talk about planning observing sessions. And I'm going to cover, and this is kind of a conversation thing. So, you know, if I don't mention something that someone is really thinks is important, you know, feel free to share it in the chat. We can discuss it a little bit. But I'm going to talk a little bit about choosing an observing site, when to observe, how to check the weather forecast, how to prepare your equipment, and then what to look at of that. And so we'll go a little bit quickly because we also want to get to our Messier minutes here at the end. So first of all, I want to share with you a light pollution map. So Samantha can share some of these links as we go. This is a site called lightpollutionmap.info. And I like it because it's got some really neat components to it. So it'll show you the reported light pollution as indicated by, get some readings, some light pollution readings that people have taken. So here's the SQM readings. Oops, what just happened there? Didn't mean to click there. Go somewhere else here. I'll click somewhere else. There we go. There we go. So here's the menu. So here you can see this is the sky brightness overhead, graded from very dark, no light pollution, to completely light pollution in the reds and white colors. And so what you can do is you can zoom in, and you can get this right down to your local, back roads in out of town, places that you might want to go observe, or maybe some favorite conservation areas or provincial parks that you visit. And you can really get a sense of the light pollution from this. Another neat thing is that it's got some other options here. So if you click on where it says World Atlas, so this is the sort of digital light pollution map interpolated between observing sites. But if you click on this, you can also get the visible radiance kind of measured by satellite. And so if you click on this, this is giving you more of a satellite picture of the actual light domes around the various cities. And I was looking, of course, where I am in Toronto. So let me come back down here to Toronto a little bit. So us down here in Southern Ontario, where it's terrible. One of the neat things is that you can do with this is you've got different years. So this is VIRRS 2021. If I go back to say 2015, I'll toggle this a little bit. You'll actually notice that the light pollution is actually a little bit less between the two. Let me go back to the 2020. Here's our 2021. See how the polluted areas got a little bit smaller. I guess due to some of the municipalities' efforts to put in better shielded lighting and LEDs. I know that it's variable. Some places are worse, some places are better. But anyway, this is a neat tool that you can use to find a site. And for us in the Greater Toronto area, we like to look up. So we have the northwestern and northeastern zones where we can get a nice dark sky. So this is a neat tool that people can play around with and search for. The other neat thing is using Google Maps. So if you use your Google Maps, in this case, the Toronto Centre has a site that we like to use called Glen Major Forest. Now, our traditional really dark site is about twice as far away from Toronto. That's this Long Sault Conservation Area site that we use. But this Glen Major site, I found because I used to live in the area when I was a kid. I was growing up, went to high school in Pickering. And what you can do is bring up the terrain or bring up the satellite imagery for a site. You can start looking for, conservation areas and things like that have these potentially dark areas away from town. Now, you always want to make sure that you have permission to observe at a site after dark. Not everybody, you certainly don't want to trespass on private property without getting someone's permission. Some of the conservation areas, will let you stay and observe with your telescopes after dark. You just need to kind of confirm that with them. One of the neat things you can do with Google Maps is that if you press the control button and tilt your mouse, you can get the terrain. And you'll see here that these yellow pins that I've got dropped here for the Glen Major site, it's literally a bowl. So you can see there's a parking lot zone that we set up in. There's room for 20 different rascals to set up down here. And what's neat is that it's in a bowl so that we don't see any of the direct lights from any of the towns to the south, sort of towards Lake Ontario, that kind of thing. So that's a neat thing that you can use to kind of explore your driving distance from home to see where you might find a new observing site. Check with if you've got a forum for your local center, or if you want to get onto the RASC National Forum, you can find a discussion group around sites in different locations, people's sharing tips for where they went and things like that. So those are great things to use for, where to go.
I'm just going to plug here because I have to. Well, too. We also, as most people know, we have the light pollution abatement program where we are actually the designator of dark sky sites in Canada. So if you're looking for a little bit more of a trip to make out of your observing session and looking for a good dark sky site, we have a whole list that we have verified. We basically go through a huge amount of checklists to make sure that it is indeed dark skies. So if you're looking for a camping trip and you want to find a dark sky site, That is my go-to, and I'm even trying to schedule a few this year to like Killarney and Algonquin. So.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about when to observe. So obviously, you know, one of the things that happened to me when I joined RASC and had a fancy new telescope to get out and use is that any clear night I wanted to get out there, and I didn't care. I didn't care what the moon was doing. It could have been a full moon. I was still keen to go. And now that I'm more jaded and I've been at it a while, and I realize that, you know, it's not the best idea. It's fun to see new members that join the centers that are going through the same thing. So you're sitting there knowing that it's going to be clear, but completely wiped out tonight because of the full moon. But then a bunch of people are keen to get out there to the dark site and observe, even though you might as well just stay at home on the driveway. But it's fine. Everybody goes through that. So yeah, check the moon phase. You want to try to get the moon either setting relatively early in the evening, leave the rest of the night, or once the moon gets to say third quarter, then it's not even rising until well after midnight, and you've got the whole evening and middle of the night section of the night to observe with. Of course, we've got our shorter dark periods at this time of the year. But one of the neat things is because the sun sets so late, then the third quarter moon also arrives, also sets later as well. So actually we get, normally if you wanted to start observing your observing window around third quarter moon, you can actually start a couple days early because the moon is rising so late in the wee hours because of that late sunset. Another neat thing you can do, and of course if the moon is full, use that to maybe don't go after nebulas and galaxies, but you can still do double stars. You can still check your equipment over. You can collimate your telescope. You can do all kinds of things. Practice with that smartphone adapter that you've got on your eyepiece. All of those things that you don't want to do when you're busy looking at all the good stuff. Pick those less useful nights for that.
And I will plug for even some veteran observers out there have not completed the Explore the Sky program, and that has plenty of constellations to observe and put your observations down with bright stars that you can do during those nights as well.
Yeah, I mean, we did our Leo deep dive a few sessions ago, and I just on this week's Skylights, I updated my description, my tour of the constellation Bootes or Bootes, however you pronounce it. And, just identifying the cool aspects of some of the different stars, which ones are double, which ones are, ancient giants, things like that. So, you can certainly do those on moon-filled nights as well.
Yeah, and I hope you go back from, I would just like to say that I went and looked at Leo after our deep dive, and now I can't look at it the same way. So I hope go back if you want to look at deep dives and constellations. We've done a couple, I think. So yeah. And we'll do some more too. People like those. So in terms of when, what time you're going to get out on site, if you've got a telescope that needs alignment, needs assembly, collimation, a number of different things. I happen to have a collapsible Dobbs, so I need the extra time to put everything together and get it tweaked up. You want to get on site before it's dark if you can help it, because you obviously don't want to arrive if there are other people at your location. You don't want to be beaming your headlights on them if you can help it, if they've already begun observing. And if you need to be able to see what you're doing, you want to be able to do that in a bit of light. So, figure out when sunset is and head out before you really need to get going on observing. I like this timeanddate.com website. You can search for your local town or city. And if you look for the timeanddate.com/sun section, and you can always find that in the main links at the top. So sunrise and sunset times. Then you can go down, and for each day of the month, it's got the appropriate, times for the different events of the day. So, sunset is fine. So sunset's around 8:45 p.m. in Toronto today. But it doesn't really get dark until the end of astronomical twilight. That's when it's fully dark. The sun is more than 18 degrees below the horizon. And for us, that means we're waiting until 11 p.m. for that sky to get truly dark at the latitude of Toronto. Basically, the different twilights are, so sunset happens, and then you get civil twilight. And that's the time when the sun is between 0 and 8 degrees, 6 degrees below the horizon.
And then you get nautical twilight when it's darker, but still not quite dark, which is 6 and 12 degrees below the horizon. And then when it's below 8, hits 18 or between 12 and 18, that's astronomical twilight. And then when that's done with, the sky is dark. And then it sort of reverses in the pre-dawn the next morning. So the sky will begin to brighten for us around 3:30 in the morning. Woefully short this time of year. And we're not even at the shortest nights yet. So yeah, timeanddate.com is a great site to use for that. All right, let's talk a little bit about checking your weather. Let's close a couple of these tabs up here.
Quick, I have a question about your personal preference for observing is, would you typically just wait to go out till astronomical twilight to observe, or would you go out a little bit earlier in nautical and see if you can get the bright objects?
Yeah, that's a great point. So even though, you know, it's really the imagers that worry most about the truly dark sky. But yeah, you can certainly get out and start looking at the brighter things well before twilight, well before the end of astronomical twilight. Good point. You don't want to waste those precious times. You know, unfortunately, we don't have planets to look at right now, but you know, there are years when at this time of the year in the summer months where we have bright planets we can enjoy looking at while we're waiting for the, you know, the dark objects to appear.
I also find that if you're out too, that time where it's a little bit brighter that you can't see everything, your eyes do start to adjust, so you don't kind of waste that time in astronomical twilight. You can be seeing dark, deep sky objects.
So what do I use to check the forecast? You know, what to expect. There's a few tools that are popular amongst the rascals. One of the most famous and popular ones is the cleardarksky.com. And you've probably seen these charts before. They'll be assigned to a particular location, and then they'll explain to you the various conditions. So what you do, if you go to the main page, and you can Google it, I've also got the link that Samantha can put in the chat if she likes. You can look for your province, and then you can actually look for a list of sites that have the forecast prepared for them, or use a map. So for example, if I go to the Ontario map, you can see that lots of people have established these forecasts, and you can zoom in. And so if I were to go to, let's see, I think Long Sault is probably in here somewhere. What do we got here? This might be, there's Ashburn. There's Long Sault Conservation Area. So if I click on Long Sault Conservation Area, then this brings me up to my forecast for that site. Now, what you've got here is an hour by hour prediction of the weather for basically close to 3 days. So 1, 2, almost 3 days of time. The bar across the top is the percentage of cloud cover, and the darker the blue, the better. And you can, so if it's white, you've got really basically fully clouded. And then if you've got something in between, medium dark blue, then you've got some sort of a scattered cloud effect happening on it. The ECMWF cloud layer here is a different, so these sky charts are generated by a gentleman by Attila Danko, and he's using forecast model developed by Art Rahill, the Canadian Meteorological Center. The second line here is a second model from, I think it might be from Europe, that's being used to calculate the cloud cover. You can see that there's some differences here where it shows clear on this one, but cloudy on this competing one. We'll get into a bit more of that here in a second. The next row is called transparency. So this is really, you know, the clarity of the air. Is it loaded with humidity and dim, or is it, you know, is it clear and dry and easy to look through? Seeing is one that can kill you. So seeing is the steadiness of the air, and you know, you may find a forecast that shows beautiful clear skies, but if you don't notice whether the seeing is lousy, then you may find yourself full of gusty winds, things dancing all over the sky, not being able to get clear views of objects, the stars, you know, pulsing and dancing due to the turbulence in the air. So you really want to look for both little cloud and good transparency and good seeing as well. So that's important. You can see here it's using a 24-hour clock. So 0 at, the red line's midnight. So we go through noon and then midnight, noon through midnight again on the different dates. And down below here, there's a line for smoke. So once we get into the summer months, you'll see the smoke, forest fire smoke starts to fill the skies, and that will impact our observing ability. And then you've got other things for wind, humidity, temperature, and so on. So that's a good one. Now, I do occasionally look at this, but it's not my favorite one. So I'll show you a couple of my more favorite ones, and I'll explain why here. So let me just open this one up.
I use this one, and I have a bad habit of always forgetting what things mean. But at the bottom of every page, there is a description of what every single symbol and color means, if you forget what we told you in this as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I dropped out if you mentioned that.
That's okay. So I like astrospheric. Astrospheric, I actually favor the ones that are a little more pessimistic, because then I find myself less likely to be disappointed. The clear sky chart tends to imply things are going to be a little bit maybe better than they really are, because they're really condensing a lot of information into one symbol or one color box. Astrospheric does a similar idea. In this case, you've got the cloud cover in the upper line. Again, the same sort of range of blue squares divided by hour. Then you've got, and you can mouse over these as well. So you can see, oops, let me just close this up. You mouse over each of these little icons, it'll give you the explanation. So that's transparency, and that you're seeing. So again, cloud, transparency, and seeing. A couple of neat extra things is you've got the KP index number here. So this is the solar or the geomagnetic storm intensity monitor. So if you start getting large KP numbers, you can be on the lookout for aurora, that kind of thing. It's got the passes of the space station. So these space station symbols are shown here. So we've got space station passes in late evening for my area, in Toronto area, over the next number of days. You've got profiles here for the moonrise and sunrise and sunset, moonrise and moonset. And then you've got a wind intensity and direction meter here. So dark, stronger winds, lighter winds. And then you've got the temperature and the dew point. And the dew point is the point at which things start getting dewy, fogging up your objective lenses, fogging up your eyepieces. And that'll happen when you see these two lines touching one another. So in other words, at the temperature it is outside, it's the same temperature that the water is condensing on objects, on surfaces. So as long as you've got a gap between these two, you're probably okay. And what your dew heater systems do and things like that is that they just raise the temperature of the optics a little bit to just maintain a gap between the dew point and the, raise your optics temperature a little bit above the dew point to keep them from dewing up or getting foggy. There's an app version of this, so you can download it on your phone or tablet. You'll find, depending on the way the real estate of your device is set up, you may have to slide back and forth here to see the future days. If you click on an hour, so let's say I click on tonight at 9 p.m., then the model updates to show me the cloud map above me. So here's my location site where the bullseye is. And as I vary hour by hour, you can see the clouds are building just north of Lake Ontario for me. Then if you go down a little bit lower, there's an extended cloud forecast where it kind of basically just, grabs the cloud bar and then projects that into the future by about another five or so days. And then there's moon details when the moon phases are occurring and a few other things. Another neat thing is that if you give them your email address, it's free. You have the ability to add multiple sites. So if I can look at my home base location, or I could look at the Toronto Center's Car Astronomical Observatory and check its forecast and see how it's going to be like. That's a neat one. There are some other map layers here. So you can go up to this icon called map layer, and you can say, check the smoke. So you can get a regional map of the different parameters. You can mouse over these different options. You can get visible clouds. You can get a light pollution map, ground forecast, and jet stream. So the jet stream is going to impact the turbulence of the air at high altitude, things like that. Or you can just go back to maps of your seeing, your transparency, and your cloud cover. So it's a great tool. And I believe you can set the time. So you can run this through different times and see how that varies over time. All right, so that's a good one. Now, if you really want to be sure, check out Clear Outside. So let me just get that one opened up here. So Clear Outside is a little bit different. Again, it's divided by each hour of the day, but in this case, you've got a 24-hour period running left to right here. You can center it on midnight or center it on midday. In this case, I've basically centered around midnight here. And the color system here is basically thumbs up, thumbs down for observing. So if you see green, your thumbs up, and if you see reddish pink, it's thumbs down. But what's great about this one is it really splits the modeling up into more details. So we've got percentage of total cloud across the top, and then we've got low cloud amount, medium cloud amount, and then high cloud amount. And so you can really get an explanation of what the problem might be. And you know, so I find this a little bit more pessimistic. You might have remembered I had a few blue squares in the astroperic. Let me go here. So here's tonight on the 24th, relatively good around 1900. So here's our kind of 1900. And this one's showing it's not going to be really clear until the hours before midnight. So compare that to here, hours before midnight. Although the seeing is going to be so-so for my area. You've also got space station passes, visibility in miles, percent of fog, wind, things like that. You've also got wind chill. So you've got your feels like, your wind chill, and so on. And you can just run down and go through the days of the week. So looking ahead. So you can either go for a glance, or you can say, well, what does the detail want? What does the detail look like? You click to open that up. You can see it. So it doesn't have the mapping features that the Astrospheric has, but I find that Clear Outside is a great one to also check, just so you have your second opinion.
Chris, on your typical getting ready for observing night, do you usually check both of these or all three? Would you be flow of events?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll check Astrospheric, and if it's not definitive, you know, if you're not looking at all clear all night sort of thing, then I might, you know, if it's marginal, then I'll check the other one just to see just how bad it might be, just in case you're contemplating that go no go idea, whether to load the car up and drive for an hour. But yeah, but it just takes a minute to, and you can also get Clear Outside, I believe, in an app form as well. So you can have them both on your app, or just open a browser tab in your phone or whatever. We've got gardeners blowing outside, so hopefully you're not hearing too much of this. I'll mention that our friend Blake Dancaro, he delivered a fantastic talk to RAS Toronto on forecasting. I'll just show you the link here. And he goes into a lot of detail about the all these different applications that I've shown you, and their pros and cons and how to use them. So highly recommend that talk. All right.
I will throw the link in the chat for everybody. Yeah.
Any questions so far?
No, I don't see. There was a comment about clear dark sky is very accurate, but sometimes is more likely to report clouds, and then the night turns out to be clear. So it says clear, you're good to go. But if it's still cloudy, then that might be, as Chris was saying, check out some other websites to see what it's like.
Yes, I forgot to mention one thing. here we go. Let me just bring this up.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, so if you get to site and it's not that great yet, or things are deteriorating, what you can use is the aviation weather website. So this is a great one. I always have a tab open on my phone, this website. So aviationweather.gov/satellite. And this is showing you, you can pick from this list down here, from this map down here, you can pick a region. So I know this is USA based, but the regions are padded with the surrounding area. So in my case, if I pick the Detroit area here, then I get Southwestern Ontario as part of this view. And what I like to use is the infrared color. And in this map, in this form, red means clear. So you can actually see topographic features through the clouds. Blue is bad. So red is good, blue is bad. And you can loop the time, so you can set it running. Now, it doesn't predict the future the way the Weather Network app would, that kind of thing. But it's a great way to open this up and see what's coming from the direction the winds are bringing it in. So if you see clouds are on their way out, you're good to go. If you see that a bunch of cloud is heading inwards over the next couple hours, then maybe you want to second thought about opening up. So this is a really handy site that I often use.
We had a question in the chat. I think you went over it briefly, but could you elaborate a little bit more on what is the difference between transparency or transparent and seeing conditions, sky conditions?
Yeah, let me just open this one up here.
Also, Ray in the chat, who says, I don't worry about perfect seeing. If it's an open evening and the sky isn't cloudy, basically I'm in. That's a good attitude for observing. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's to your own taste. If you're on a mission, if you're doing an observing program, or if you need to have good sky conditions to be able to see small lunar features or something, or if you're trying to split double stars, then you're going to be a little pickier. But if you're just out to enjoy the night sky and just look at whatever is available to you, then you don't have to stress about it as much, and just to enjoy seeing what you can see. But the problem with the so the seeing is what's affecting that. The seeing is the stability of the air, how pinpoint the star images are. Are they bloated and kind of dancing, or are they nice pinpoints? So that's what the seeing does to you, is it kind of makes the image through the eyepiece, either be rock solid and steady, or a bit swimming. It's kind of, wavy. The transparency, though, is going to affect, it's not going to affect the moon, it's not going to affect the planets, but transparency is the transmission of light through the Earth's atmosphere. So if you're looking for galaxies and you've got a lot of humidity in the air, or smoke particles, or dust, or something like that, it's gonna extinct them and make them dimmer. You're gonna say, wow, I should be able to see this galaxy. It says it's bright enough for me to see it, but I'm not really picking it up. It's probably because the air is not clean enough, transparent enough to allow all those photons to get through. So you can kind of decide what you're chasing tonight, and then decide whether the conditions are going to suit what you're after. I think that kind of covers that.
Yes, it would. Would seeing affect tracking for astrophotography specifically? That's a follow-up question we have, or just in general for what you're trying to look for.
Yeah. So if you're imaging, the seeing's not going to affect your tracking per se. Although it'll bloat your, if you're using a guide camera or something like that, it'll bloat your guide star and maybe hamper your accuracy a little bit. But it'll also mean you're probably going to be rejecting a lot of frames, because you've got a lot of impaired frames, and you only have moments of really good clarity. So yeah, but yeah, it certainly can work. If you're imaging, you can probably tolerate the seeing conditions being impaired, but transparency, maybe you're collecting photons through the thick air, maybe you're okay too. It varies. All right.
I do a lot of science imaging, so as long as I can get some photons, that's usually what I'm going for. So
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about prepping for the night. You've decided that the weather's going to be great. You're good to go, and you can look. Yeah, of course, the other thing is to check in advance and check every day. And as you get closer, it can completely change. So that's goes without saying. If you want to be, preparing for a night out, you want to get your eyepieces cleaned up. I like to use something like a lens pen with the camel hair brush that I can use to take the dust off the optics off the glass before I use the lens pen to wipe them clean. Don't forget your diagonals, because if your star diagonals get dusty, they'll affect your viewing more than your primary mirror or objective lens will, because it's so much closer to the eyepiece. If you want to clean them off, collimate your telescope if it needs it. So if you're using a reflector or a Schmidt-Cassegrain, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Especially don't tackle it on the morning of the night you're planning to go out and see everything. Pick those full moon nights or something like that to collimate your telescope and star test it. Let's see, you want to make sure you've got your batteries charged up and you've got spare batteries. So, I went off to Amazon and I bought a package of the CR 2032 batteries that fit into my Telrad finder, or one of your red dot finders take that kind of battery typically. You make sure the batteries in your headlamp are charged up or replaced if they need them, or just have spares just in case. If you're using anything for controlling dew or frost, those take a lot of power. So you want to make sure you've got ample battery available for those as well. Bear in mind that anything that needs heating, like a dew heating system, takes that gobbles up power. So be mindful of that. Have a checklist if you're the kind of person that's prone to forgetting a key item or something like that. A lot of people I know just have a checklist that they pull out and they just say, yep. Oop, forgot that. And then they go off and get that one.
Rask needs to make one of those "have you packed it" checklists. They get it. It can check for your observing sessions for everybody.
Now, prepping yourself. So one piece of advice is don't consume alcohol unless you're imaging. So alcohol is not great for visual acuity. If you're not worrying about it, have at it, have fun. But if if you want your eyes to be at their peak, you may want to wait to have your beer or your cocktail after you get home. Unless the camera's doing the work, in which case you may not care as much. Do hydrate though. I like taking green tea in a thermos. I think that it's kind of a nice little break. Water is always, of course, good to have, or cocoa or coffee. If you're drinking coffee, some of us like to grab coffee on the way to the observing site. Don't forget that caffeine is a diuretic, and so you're going to need a washroom when you get there, probably. And so you want to know, is there a place with a washroom? Is there a place for discretion? That kind of thing. So bear that in mind. Even in the warmer months, bring your hand warmers, your chemical hand warmers and things like that, because you never know when it's going to be chillier than you think, or if the dew point is at that line and your optics are starting to fog up. You can throw a hand warmer in the front of your refractor telescope and just warm up your objective a little bit, or you can strap one to the bottom of the outside of your telescope to just add a little bit of heat just to keep everything clean and clear. Bug spray, of course, is really good to have. Don't spray your bug spray right next to your telescope. Walk away and do that. What I like to do is I like to make a fist, spray the outside of my fist, so that my fingertips and everything are bug spray free. So I make each fist and I spray that, and then I've got clean hands.
So that is due to DEEP being a plasticizer. So if you get it on most of our equipment is plastic now, it's going to mess it up. I can't advise, this is something who's had discussions on in other courses I teach. There is DEET-free stuff that you can get, but don't quote me, it's going to be better for your equipment. Oh,
yeah. You want to, well, don't risk it. So I think my technique's probably pretty good where you can get it on your fingertips if you can help it. Don't forget the back of your neck, your ears, your ankles, things like that. Bring your hoodie, bring your hat, bring your gloves, even if it's June, July, August, they keep the bugs off, and eventually after a few hours, the bugs tend to go to bed, leave you alone, and then you're okay. You can warm and cool down and take some of that stuff off. But it's handy to have, especially if you're assembling your telescope, have your hat and your hoodie on, and they're buzzing around you, but they're not biting. Let's see, what else have I got? Music. Some people I used to observe with like to have classic rock playing, and I think that's great. Sometimes I put it in my earbuds, but be respectful, be mindful of your neighbors, and make sure everybody's okay with it before you get into that. Some people like opera. That's good too, but you want to make sure everybody's cool with it before you go ahead and use it.
Somebody also mentioned here, which might lead into the next one. If you're imaging or using EAA, make sure you have good cable management, because you want darkness and you don't want to trip and fall.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, some essential tools. Bring tools. So a lot of people, find something breaks or something has come loose, and you're stuck. I have a tripod on my HEQ5 Mount Pro with the leg levelers on it. And for the longest time, the legs kept falling off, the tips kept falling off. So then I bought a set of Allen keys, and I bring my Allen keys every time, and I can tighten them up if that happens. Allen keys are really important because a lot of people will have screwdrivers in their cars if you're with other people, but not everybody has the Allen keys. So consider having those. Make sure it's metric or imperial, whichever set you need. Observing chair can be a game changer. If you don't have an observing chair, I highly recommend it. It's great to be able to sit down, take some strain off your back, take some strain off your feet, and you can raise the seat up if you got a good one. That'll raise it up to the eyepiece height, so you can relax while you're looking at that. The other is a table. If you're getting into observing certificates or observing programs, it's really helpful to have a stable table, and even a red lamp or something like that, a dim red lamp that just can shine on your work surface where you're going to be writing your notes.
I suggest if you're bringing other people out, especially if they're not observers, to bring them like comfy chairs to sit in and/or blankets, because they will get cranky faster than you will. So make sure you cover them as well, so they still enjoy the time, and then you hook them in to observing.
Yeah, and in fact, I was going to say in a minute here that plan to have binoculars break. So bring your binoculars, even if you didn't plan to observe with them. If you've got, people are looking a little bit bored or need some distraction, hand them your binoculars and start letting them look around. They'll discover things. You can point them to a few things. It's great. It's a good way to get off your feet for a little bit and just soak it all in with using your binoculars. See whether you can see the same targets through your binoculars that you're viewing through your telescope. What I like to do is I always find that after I pack the car up to come home, the sky is glorious just at that moment. So I like to have my binoculars available so I can at least have a last look around for 5 or 10 minutes before I drive home. A couple other tips. If you are logging, if you're making notes and if you're after dim objects and you've got your dark adaptation rocking and everything else, consider having some dark paper to cover part of your logbook. The bright pages, even the red light reflecting off the bright pages can kind of night blind you a little bit. So have some dark paper to cover up the side of the page you're not using. And yeah, have those extra batteries. And I can't say how many times a rascal has saved another rascal's evening because they had spare batteries. I mean, we do it for one another all the time, and it's just good, good rascal.
If you've ever tried to observe without your red dot finder working and no finder scope, it's very difficult. We forgot that on our last observing session. Somebody brought out their old telescope and their viewfinder wasn't powered up, so we struggled a lot. And now I'm going to remember never to have that happen to me again.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta, if you have a box where you're bringing your eyepieces and things, couple of AA, couple of AAAs, a couple just 2032s, and you're good to go. You'll be good, and then you'll be able to help anybody else that runs into problems. Yeah, and if you do have any problems with dewing or frosting, you know, in a pinch, if you have a fan that you can blow some air across it, and that can help clean up some of the dew. Portable hand warmers, as I said, dew shield, you know, even if you're rolling up, you know, some Duotang cover or something like that, just to extend the front of your tube, your refractor, you can save yourself from getting clouded, dewed out. All right. So last up, last couple things is what to look at. So a lot of people will have already been using apps like Sky Safari or Stellarium. Sky Safari is great in the sense that it's got a lot of observing lists built into it and the means to actually plan your session. You can actually, there's a tool in the Plus and Pro programs that'll let you, you know, given today's date, what patch of the sky you want to focus on, which constellation you want to focus on, what kind of object you want to focus on. You press go and it'll make a list for you of the objects that are available. We'll actually do a future session on some making good use of Sky Safari. I think that would be a good topic for us to cover in the future. They're also great because, you know, if you're at the eyepiece, you can have the regular view showing for up to the sky using the gyro and compass. And then when you're at the eyepiece, you can use the flip buttons to invert the display to match what you're seeing through the eyepiece, depending on your type of telescope. So let's talk about, you know, another really good thing is check ahead for special events. So a lot of people think they're just going to go out and look at the planets, stars, you know, some deep sky objects, but don't forget the space station might be flying overhead. So you've got your heavensabove.com that you can give a quick look at before you head out to see if the space station is going to be flying overhead. Maybe there's a meteor shower. I remember a couple of instances at Glen Major Forest where it wasn't even dark yet, and a couple of us saw some huge fireballs scoot across the sky because we happened to be there during a meteor shower event. You can go to amsmeteors.org or the imo.net, and they both have meteor shower catalog or meteor shower calendar pages. If Jupiter's around, check and see whether there'll be a great red spot on Jupiter tonight or a Galilean moon shadow transit across the planet. There's a tool on Sky and Telescope that Samantha can put in there for us, where you can dial in today's date or a future date, and it'll tell you when the predicted passes are. Or you can use, you know, Starwalk or Stellarium or Sky Safari app. Most of them, I think, have accurate representations of the Great Red Spot and the moon shadow transits. Saturn's moon Iapetus is the one that's dark on one hemisphere and bright on one hemisphere, and it actually varies dramatically in brightness, whether it's east or west of Saturn. And so that's kind of a neat observing project that you can think of looking at. Do a little research. Off the top of my head, I don't remember which is which right now, but it doesn't take a lot to find out. And so you can say, oh, I think Saturn's up tonight. Is the Iapetus going to be bright or fainter? And take a look and compare them later on. Don't forget about visible comets. So I like a site called arith.net. And there's another site called inthesky.org. I'll open that one up so people can see that one. I'll bring that one up on here. And share my screen. Here we go. So this is in-the-sky.org/data/comets. And this has got the current comets that are observable. You can set where you're viewing from. This one happens to be Ottawa, but you can change it to wherever you are. And you can also vary the tabs here for a sky chart, planets, asteroids, and so on. This one's the comets tab. You can see that there's a comet and Comet Pan-STARRS is in Ophiuchus, magnitude 9.6. So, you know, pretty much any backyard telescope is good to go for these these first few that are magnitude 9 or 10. It's in the process of brightening, and then you can click on these and get extra details. So you'll see altitude chart, and you can even get a finder chart for it as well. So that's a great one to use. Maybe you've got asteroids in opposition. So here's a nice site that'll tell you whether there are any asteroids that are nice and bright to look at tonight. So this is astrovanbuitenen.nl from the Netherlands. And this person has been kind enough to list the asteroids that are currently bright enough for amateur telescopes. You can see here's Vesta, and you get to see where it is, its magnitude, and so on. So that's a neat one to look at. Or maybe you want to check out a supernova. So when I was out of the city about a month ago in a dark location not far from the Carr Observatory, I remembered that I'd heard about a supernova that was near M60. And I think Blake is up in Killarney Park. I think he imaged it last week. It's in the process of fading, but it's still visible. Not in M60, but in a galaxy beside M60. But if you go to this,
go ahead. We got it on the Rask telescope as well.
That's
We've
right.
had quite a few people. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to rochesterastronomy.org, then you can see the latest supernovae. Here are their magnitudes and their host galaxies, and so you can check this out, when you're planning your session. If you want to know whether the moon is going to occult a bright star, you can go to the International Occultation Timing Association website, head on down here, and here's the 2022 worldwide total occultations of bright stars. And you can see here, so we've got where we are near the end of May. So what's up in Canada? So we've got Eastern Canada on June 13th, Delta Scorpii, and this is the visibility chart for that. And then if you really want to get keen and you want to look at an asteroid occulting a star in the distance, then you can look for the asteroidal occultations, and Samantha can put the asteroidoccultation.com link in the chat for you as well. So I cover
all these links are in the chat, and for my YouTube friends, they're all in the description box. If you missed them, you can always go back and check, because we know we've thrown a lot of links at you right now.
So obviously, when I do my skylights on Sundays, I mention as many of these special events as I can think of that are within reach of most people. In Sky News, they get talked about. In the Sky This Month, that's presented by many of the Rask centers. They'll highlight the objects or the events that are, great to look at this month. Think about when you're going out, think about, maybe there's nothing special happening. So what then? What are you going to look at then? Well, you can consider spending some quality time with some old friends. You'll look at some things you've seen before, but maybe you've got a better eyepiece or a new telescope, or maybe they're higher in the sky than they were before, so they're in better circumstances to see them, and just get a little more, appreciation out of an object that maybe you visited before. Consider sketching. Sketching's fun. So I haven't gotten in much of that, but that's a fun thing to do.
That's my favorite thing to do. That's what keeps me observing.
My philosophy behind the Beyond Messier articles in Sky News is that I wanted to introduce people to things, and myself to things that I hadn't tried before, hadn't looked at before. So things that are not the old Messier list. Here we go. Yeah, so I've got some in here. These are some northerly galaxies that are still visible, even though we're getting past our spring galaxy season. So in the current Sky News articles. So go back, you can go back. I've been doing them now for 2 years. So you can go back and find lots of seasonal objects to look at that you may have not heard of or may have not known. If you download, I've downloaded a list of the NGC and IC catalog, deep sky catalogs. And if you sort them by constellation and brightness, you'll find that there are lots of deep sky objects in constellations that aren't on the Messier list, but were just as bright. And so you can start at the top of the brightest ones and kind of work your way down. You look at the Caldwell objects. So I think last month I wrote about the Caldwell objects in Sky News. There's about 60 or 70 of those 110 Caldwells are visible from Canada. The others, you have to go to the Southern Hemisphere to see them.
Sure. I'll take a
other
trip to
tips.
Australia.
Yeah, or South America, even Central America is enough, you know.
Sure.
So a couple more things to think about is maybe it's a glorious night. Maybe it's going to be clear all night long. You know, catch those next season's targets now. This is great for you. If you stay up late in September, you can start picking off winter targets, you know, if you stay up into the wee hours. A few books that I think are really, really cool, really helpful. This is Peter Birrin's Objects in the Heavens. It's a small little book, spiral bound. And what he does is he takes every constellation, he has a sky chart, and then a list of the cool things to look at. Double stars, deep sky objects, maybe you know, other just interesting objects that are in there. So that's a neat one that's good to have. Let's see, Turn Left at Orion by Guy Consolmagno. Sue French's Deep Sky Wonders is it's a big tome, but it's also a good book for inspiration. There are the Night Sky Observing Guide series, the big volumes by Kepple and Center, which are great to have. They go into like more detail. You'll never run out of things to look at in those books. They go into a lot of detail. Mark Bratton, who's a rascal, he wrote a great book on observing the Herschel objects, which I think is terrific. And then Stephen O'Meara, the American astronomer Stephen O'Meara, has published his Deep Sky Companion series of books. So I think I've got 5 of them. Yeah, 5 of them. They're great. They're less for at the eyepiece and more for finding out more about what I saw. So I'll use them over coffee the next morning. So I like to use those then. A few last thoughts on your observing night. Think about what order you're going to look at things in, right? So things set in the west, so you want to get your westerly objects first and leave your easterly objects for later. Fainter objects are better when they're higher in the sky. So, you know, pick faint things that are high up, but you can tolerate things that are bright, can tolerate being a little bit lower, so you can grab those. Have a plan B, you know. So you may have gone out to look at DSOs, but maybe you've got smoke or dust or something. So look at planets, double stars, star clusters, things that are a little bit brighter. And yeah, do a constellation deep dive, you know, go through the different, click on each star in the app, let's say, and find out some fun facts about it. And then the moon, you know, stay at home, look at the moon. It's no problem. Maybe you don't want to feel like driving and packing up. There's lots of endless things to see on the moon. The trick is you need good seeing and lots of magnification. And last tip I had here is consider making that list and writing it out or printing it out, and you can cross things off as you see. So I'll stop there, take questions.
I'll add a couple more things. So for the observing list, even if you don't have a, like you want to have a baseline, we have on the ras.ca observing programs, we have printable like blank observing records. So you have a place to start, you can write in the object you want to do first, and you have a whole space to talk about your description and your sketching area. I also, when I'm planning for using the robotic telescope, I use the planetarium software on there, and this is where Stellarium help comes in handy because you can actually see where the objects are going to be throughout your night sky if you can't visual them as well as I am. So that's where last week's session was really helpful. So go back and check out our Stellarium. In terms of questions, I was asked about showing some of my sketches. I do a lot of like moon sketches. They're not amazing. If you go back, we did with Bettina Forget. Sorry if I pronounced her name wrong. She showed us how to do lunar sketching and just tips and tricks for that. And I showed my live sketches on there. At the end of every explore the moon at noon, we sketch together. It's very simple. you don't need to be an artist. Just draw what you see. I think the next step for me will be to start looking at something other than the moon. I just am very attached to the moon because it's so easy, so many targets, and I don't have to leave my front door. So there's your hint. If you want to see some of my sketches, go on to those previous webinars.
Well,
We also have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, we're going to do globular clusters next time, I think. And those are great for sketching too, because they come in a different variety of shapes and sizes. So
I should. I eventually am going to be inspired, I think, to bring it into some other art too. I love the combination between the two of them. We have a question. I think I saw M57 last night from Toronto. Is it possible to see M71? Do you mean, those are just questions we had about that. I'm not quite sure if you understand.
M71, let's just see where things are at here. Okay. So let me just share my screen. Here we go. And we'll go to, so M57, that's over in Lyra, but M71, oops.
Or finding out that Terry gave a good tip, putting a drop sheet underneath your scope. So if you drop anything, you can find it easier, and it keeps away from the cool ground that it might fall on. So if you're going for some intensive observing sessions, well, you don't even have to do that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You know, that's one of the things I like about the Glen Major site, is that it's basically a big flat gravel parking area. So you don't have to worry about long grass and things like that, you know, losing things in. So that's a great tip, especially if you're working in a grassy area. Yeah, so M71 is a relatively bright cluster, globular cluster in Sagitta. If you're out late enough, certainly could have seen it. And then I think you said M57.
Yeah, they saw M57 and they were looking, see if they could see M71.
Yeah, absolutely possible. All right, let's do our Messier minutes.
It's a great lead-in. Speaking of observing lists too, if you don't already know, so welcome to Messier minutes again. We actually, I put together a PDF with all the tips that Chris talks about, the list. There's finder charts, as well as a page for your observing log with the Messier objects we have discussed in this past week. So print some of those off and take them out, and have your plan using that as well. And with that, I'll let Chris introduce the Messier objects for this week. For the next 2 weeks.
So we've reached the end of the spring Messiers. There's lots of them. So the spring Messiers are the most numerous of the 4 seasons. And so we've managed to get through all of them, and now we're just left to a handful. And what I've left for last is, because this is a moonless week, galaxies that are right overhead, perfectly positioned for us, right overhead, near the end of the Big Dipper's handle. So here's the green Z is the zenith. This is the sky overhead around 11 p.m. Tonight. Certainly not going to change much over the next couple of weeks. There you've got the Big Dipper sitting here just to the upper left of that, or to the west of the zenith. And then we've got a number of these red ovals, which are the galaxies in the area that we haven't yet talked about. So first up, I'm mentioning is Messier 63. So Messier 63 is a flocculent spiral galaxy. And what that means is that its arms are patchy and discontinuous. So this is the view, a simulated view through a 6-inch reflector, Dobsonian reflector, using a 26mm Plossl eyepiece. Its nickname is the Sunflower Galaxy. I'll just zoom in on it manually here. So flocculent means that the arms are kind of numerous, but kind of discontinuous and patchy. So they're not, one dominant or several dominant strong arms. It's sort of many arms, more like flower petals, if you want to think of it that way. Yeah, so this one's in Canis Venatici. And one of the neat things that you can use to find this easily is take the 2 stars in Canis Venatici, so Corcoroli, which is a really nice double star, and Chara, and just imagine making this a right angle. So take the Chara core correlate and make a right angle instead. And that's where you'll find M63. So that's a really easy way of finding that. This one has a pretty bright oval core. You can see it in small aperture telescopes. If you do have a bigger telescope, you can start looking for hints of the structure. You can look for some asymmetry because you've got dark dust on the one side of it here. Let's see. It's about 37 million light years away. So those are some things that you can look for. Another way to find it is to see if you can find these brighter stars, this magnitude 4.7 star, 20 CVN. You could try finding it using that. But I think you'll find the trick of making a set square will probably be your easiest bet. Closer in to these two stars, we've got Messier 94. So Messier 94 is a stubby, it's a spiral galaxy. It has a kind of a stubby or elongated core to it, like a stubby bar. A very bright halo, as you can see in this image. And that means it's probably accessible to good binoculars from dark sites. Certainly in smaller telescopes, you can see it. You might even think it looks a bit like a planetary nebula because it's sort of a uniform, kind of a roundish glow in your smaller telescope. But in a bigger telescope, you can start looking for this bright ring. We just get rid of the bright star here in the center. Yeah, so you can look for this kind of a brighter ring around the core. And then in an image, there's actually a very faint ring well outside. This is basically one or two long arms that are kind of wrapped around in a faint ring around the outside. This one's about 16 million light years away. And the way I recommend finding it is to take those two stars of Canis Venatici and just make a squat triangle on the side towards the dipper. So you want to locate the dipper and you say, okay, I'm going to start halfway along this line and just jump up by about, I think it's a couple of degrees. Let me just measure this up for you. Yeah, basically about a thumb's width. So if you take the difference between these two and jump this way by your thumb's width towards the dipper's handle, then you'll pick it up. So that one's nickname is the Croxi Galaxy. All right, next up, we've got our two famous galaxies beside the handle of the dipper. So Alkaid is the star at the tip of the dipper's handle. We've got Messier 101 and Messier 51, two famous ones. So M101, here we go, we're sending this up, is the famous Pinwheel Galaxy. And the Pinwheel Galaxy is a kind of a face-on spiral galaxy. The arms are relatively loosely distributed around it. What I like to do is take Mizar and Alcor and then Alkaid and just make kind of an equilateral triangle here in the direction, direction away from Canis Venatici. So kind of on the Polaris side or the Little Dipper side, or above the handle if you want to think of it that way. And you can see this one relatively easily in binoculars if your sky is dark, if you're away from the city lights. Really no problem for any size of a telescope. And if you've got a bit more aperture, you can look for the structure that you can see here. You can see that it's not a symmetric shape. There's some distortion in the spiral arms. So that's made this galaxy one of Halton Arp's disturbed galaxies or peculiar galaxies, ARP number 26. I can also look for other galaxies nearby. So you can see there's one here. And if I bring up the other list, the NGC objects here, you can see that there are NGCs composed of star-forming regions or clumps in the spiral arms if you've got really good optics or if you want to take an image. And then, as I said, you can pick up some of these additional galaxies in the neighborhood as well. All right, so that's that one. Now, nearby, we have M51. So it's on the opposite side of the handle from M101. And for this one, what's typical is you want to take the end of the handle of the dipper and just go 90 degrees. So you kind of take the Mizar Alkaid line and jog a right angle from it back over towards Canis Venatici and about half the span. So maybe half the Messier alkite span. It's about 3 degrees, I think. So M51 is the famous Whirlpool galaxy. Just center this up here. And this is a glorious face-on spiral. It's more compact. So it's actually a bit easier to see in smaller telescopes and good binoculars. So you can definitely pick it up in binoculars. You can even see this one from the suburbs if your moon's out of the way. And of course, the bigger aperture telescope will show you some more detail. It'll show you the secondary galaxy off to the side, maybe even the star bridge that's connecting those up. And you might see some of these, these knots of brightness from the H2 star forming regions in that galaxy. It's another ARP because of the secondary galaxy beside it. It's another one of these ARP numbers. This is ARP 85 if you're collecting those. All right. And
we have a question in the chat. Oh, sorry, about M51. Can you see it with a 10 by 42 binoculars? I'm assuming they're talking about. They just listed 10 by 42.
Yes.
Okay.
If your sky is sufficiently dark, even from the suburbs, you could try it. Now that I've shown you the trick of where to look, you can see if you can try it from home or whether you need it a little bit away from the city lights. I've definitely seen both of those 101 and 51 in my 10 by 42s from the Carr Observatory, near Collingwood, Ontario. So that's no problem at all. All right, and the last one we have of our spring Messiers is Messier 102. This is a little bit trickier because it's not, near too many bright landmarks, but it's tucked here on the coils of the Dragon, Draco. So again, if we're looking kind of facing south, then the region you're looking for is, above the handle of the Dipper, sort of below the Little Dipper, kind of towards Hercules on the side here. So let me just bring this back into the middle here. So this is the Spindle or Fool's Gold Galaxy. And you can see if I bring up my Dobsonian view, it's much smaller than the other one. So it's a challenge. So it's not really a binoculars target. Certainly could see it in small telescopes if you can find it. A large telescope will show its halo. Let me just bring up the image of that here. So there you can get a better sense of it. I'll just change the eyepiece here so you can see a bit more magnification. Here's a 6mm Plossl. So you can see it's sort of an oval lozenge shape. So there is a bisecting dust lane that runs through it that you can check out. You might be able to spot and kind of see it in this image here. And to find it, what I would recommend is a few tricks you can use. So if you can find the star Edasich or Edasich, Iota Draconis, it's actually located about 4 degrees to the west of that star. But I think the easiest ways to find it will be to, and that's towards the Arcturus side of the Dragon. If you take a line from, let's see, I think it's Theta. Yeah, the star next to Edasich is Theta, and it's kind of a third of the way along that line towards the tip of the Dipper's handle. So if you kind of take a third of that leap and look a little bit to the side of it. Or one other trick is to, if your sky is dark enough to see all the stars of Draco, you can find these two, which are Kappa and Thuban, or Alpha, and you can just take that line and double it, and that takes you right to it. So there's a few different ways of seeing it. So look for the dust lane, look for field stars around it. It's about 50 million light years away. That's why it's smaller and farther and a bit more challenging. But, so that's it. So if you get all those and you've been following along, then you're done the spring Messiers, and we're ready to dive into the summer globulars on our next session.
So if you have any questions about Messiers, put them in the chat. I also would love to know if anybody has actually viewed any Messiers since we started the Messier Minutes, and let us know how we're helping. And we have one question about a previous is, the parking lot in the Glen Major Forest, I think you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, how do you find it?
How did I find it?
How do you find it? Like, how does one find it?
Okay, I'll bring it up. I'll show you. I'll share my screen here.
They were told they couldn't miss it, but then they missed it.
All right. So let's load this up. Here we go. Okay. All right, so the couple of easy ways to get there is you can come up Brock Road. So if you go east on either the 401 from Toronto, or if you want to get on the Highway 7 or Highway 407 and get off at Brock Road and drive north, then you're going to come to the town of Claremont, which is here. And then what you can do is head up to the Pickering-Uxbridge Town Line Road. That's this one here. See if I can bring up the labels. Uxbridge Pickering Town Line Road. It's labeled. If you follow that along, it comes up to a T. When you get to the T, head north, and you're gonna jog north about, it's about a kilometer or so north. And there's a sign beside the side of the road that's labeled Duffin's Headwaters, Duffin's Creek Headwaters, I believe. So it's not necessarily labeled Glen Major Forest. Let me see if I can bring my Street View guy here. See if he'll work. Yeah, there's the sign. So you're looking for East Duffin's Headwaters. That's the sign. And I think I can drive forward. The gate's always open. It's a big open spot, and it's a great site.
Thank you.
So hopefully that helps.
And
go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, some people know this road. The road that you're turning north on is also actually a continuation of Westney Road, but it's actually Concession 6 in Uxbridge. So it's the Uxbridge Pickering Town Line and Concession 6. It's also the continuation of Westney Road from Pickering Township.
Okay, thank you. And while you're chatting about that, Pat shared that they were halfway through the Messier program, but poor weather means they're not going to finish it probably till next winter/spring. But good for you. That is impressive. It's a great job. I hope everybody else is finding these tips and tricks helpful to start moving through the Messier program.
So we started Messier Minutes partway through autumn. We were actually past autumn, but we grabbed some of the autumn ones. And so I think I figured out that it'll take us to mid-October to finish everything up.
It's almost, oh yeah, we started actually in like winter because we started Messier Minutes, I think, in February. Yeah, we did. February 1st was our first Messier Minutes.
February 1st, but we snuck in some late autumn features. And so doing about 10, I think I planned about 10 per month from now until, I think I worked it out to October 25th to finish it to the end. So hopefully
stay tuned.
We're still around, still going strong by then.
You know what? These are great. And if you ever want to just check out the Messier segments, I was not great at finishing it for last week, but I do have a playlist where I have cropped out just the Messier Minute segments from our full Insider's Guide. So you can just refer back to that if you're looking for those tips and tricks. And these are all linked on ras.ca/Messier Minutes, aligning with the episode and the corresponding PDFs. And as we said, we're going to have one more, I think, bi-weekly session, and then we move into 2 weeks from now, we have a session, and then we move into once a month. Am I correct by saying that?
Yeah, June 7th. June 7th is going to be our Globular Cluster Spectacular. I'm going to talk about neat things like, why are they still globular? Why haven't they collapsed? Why aren't they disks instead? And which are the best ones to see? The nearest, the farthest, the biggest, the smallest, all that cool kind of thing. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, check out on ras.ca/Insider's Guide for our upcoming schedule, and we'll let you know when we're not going to be every 2 weeks. So don't you worry. Okay. So
Thanks,
I don't think
everybody.
we have any more questions, just a lot of thanks. And we thank you all for continuing to come to these sessions. If you didn't show up, we wouldn't be able to keep doing them. So we appreciate you.
Clear
Okay.
skies, fingers crossed for the meteor storm, that it's clear and that it happens. So cross everything you have. And we'll see